So anyways, let's see. We can take one more call before we get to this break, I think.
Okay.
We got Ed.
Excellent. Hey, Ed, welcome.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, calling from Chicago. I wanted to shed some light on Brazil because, India is getting, more news coverage on with the COVID, but Brazil is another populated country. Yeah. And I hear that they're getting, how do you pronounce that vaccine, starts with an A?
Oh, AstraZeneca. Right.
Right, and then there's another one, and they're getting this, from China, and I guess the president's been criticizing them. So they should have been getting more Pfizer and Moderna. And
well, there isn't more. That's the issue. There isn't more. There, both of those, because they're 2-dose vaccines, the volume needed, unlike the Johnson & Johnson, which is a single dose, and the AstraZeneca.
Which is one,
right. Well, the only reason why there's extra AstraZeneca is because the pause we put on it because of the concerns with it, and the Brits started that first. They started, there was a Northern European pause in a couple of different countries about AstraZeneca. So it basically, they were still producing it. So there's a stockpile of AstraZeneca, whereas the rest of the Pfizer and Moderna largely is spoken for, which is why there's that argument about giving India the right to produce it without paying patents to the people who invented it, for example, or at least right away. The idea is that, my argument would be is that if you're going to make people pay for the patented ability to make that later on, that you prorate it out over decades because you can. But right now it's an emergency and we need to make as much as possible. And there is not enough Moderna and Pfizer to go around in that regard. There just isn't, because like I said, it's a 2-dose. It's, in the case of Pfizer, it's a 0.5 milliliters. In the case of the Moderna, the other way around. Moderna's 0.5 milliliters, Pfizer's 0.3 milliliters. You get about 7 to 8 doses per vial, and storage and movement and all that kind of stuff makes it difficult to transport and stuff. And when you're talking about Brazil, Johnson & Johnson was supposed to be, and possibly AstraZeneca, is the savior of those situations because you don't have the infrastructure for, refrigerated trucks at that level to get the Moderna and Pfizer out there. Even if you wanted to, getting it, distributed throughout Brazil and India, quite frankly, is a logistical nightmare. India's obviously got a much stronger infrastructure because it's a huge country with lots of people, and there's lots of, there's a wealthy infrastructure there that exists that, that China's been at war with, hence the physical dust-ups at the border over the water in Tibet that they've been having. Brazil does not have that. Brazil's infrastructure, if it's not criminal, it's corrupt in a lot of ways, and that's the problem they have. They have a much better chance of getting Johnson & Johnson into the arms of people because it can be stored at normal temperatures like other vaccines that they've had, and you can have Doctors Without Borders and the UN roll in and start giving people shots. That's the issue that they have. And like I said, AstraZeneca, there's just a lot more of it. It's just a volume thing.
What about the military? What do you think about using the military? Like the U.S. can cover Brazil and then China can cover India since, they're closer over there?
China's not, India's not going to let the Chinese military into their country to cover that at all. It's just not going to happen. That would be considered an invasion. They are literally, if you've been watching over the last 3 years, there's an area and sort of almost an autonomous zone.
I was kind of hoping they would kind of blow that off.
No, look, the whole fight, the free Tibet thing that we've been talking about, and everybody thinks it's about the Dalai Lama and the right of the Tibetan people and stuff. Nothing to do with the social construct of that area at all. There is a fight over the water that comes from the glaciers and the tops of those mountains, and the Chinese and the Indians both need it, and they're fighting over it. That's 100% what's going on. They don't care about the religious beliefs of the Tibetans at all. It is 100% a resource war. And it has been going on for a long time, and it will continue until they find another solution or one of them gets a hold of it. But the Indians are never going to let the Chinese have military forces into their country, even for benevolent reasons. They're actually pushing back on in Africa right now because the Chinese have rolled all over Africa building infrastructure like the Brits did when they ended slavery, when they, their trade-off with the Kenyans, when they were, fighting the slave trade, the legal slave trade in Kenya. One of the ways the Brits did it was to build roads and trains into the inside of the the country in an exchange for like, okay, stop selling slaves and we'll build this for you ages ago. That's what the Chinese have been doing without the slave trade part. They've just been building infrastructure, but you owe us later. Just, we'll put it on your tab. And that's what the Indians have been pushing back against. The Brazilians have a relationship with Russia. If there's anything that's going to be pushing into Brazil in terms of getting the vaccine, it'll be either the Sputnik 2 vaccine or the Chinese vaccine distributed by the Russians. And that's a concern for our country as far as security, because what they're looking for is a South American staging base for all kinds of shenanigans in our hemisphere. So that's why, you know, but even the Russians and the Chinese don't trust the Brazilian government enough to give them limited resources. And again, the Russians are broke. They have a smaller economy than California. As much as they're a big threat, most of that threat is left over from either nukes that they'll, like, literally the threat of Russian nukes is if you're not nice to us, we'll stop watching. We'll let the Kazakhstanis roll in and just crate them off in boxes. And that's our threat. Not that they're going to launch missiles, but they're just going to let them go. And the other part is, of course, that Russia does the cheap stuff really well. They do ransomware. They do hackers. They do, you know, those kind of shenanigans in Ukraine to try and attack Biden, to monkey with our elections and that kind of stuff. But they don't have the money for even the infrastructure. The average Russian lives on less than 9,000 US in current dollars a year. They're broke, and they've got a lot of people. And so the idea that they're going to roll in anybody, that's why they haven't been adventurous. They're trying to take back the territory they had in terms of Ukraine and Crimea because there's gas there. They can make money off that because they don't have any. They're starting, the only thing they have is the oil and gas that's going to Europe. They have nothing else to get. When's the last time you bought a Russian car or a Russian washing machine or a Russian laptop? Nobody in their right mind would do that. Even the software, we've stopped using that. They had security software that was being used in the United States. That stopped a year and a half ago. So they're hurting in that regard. And the Chinese, I mean, they're building paper buildings all over the place. They're digging a financial hole for themselves. That the only way out is the resources in Africa and then eventually the water that would go to India. So there's so much geopolitical stuff that goes on beyond this. And the problem with Brazil, and I know I got to go to a break, and I appreciate you bringing this up. The problem that Brazil has with vaccinating its public and with the infrastructure that they have there is that the government of Brazil doesn't mind killing off a big chunk of its population. That they know that the rich and connected and the well-to-do and the international travelers and those folks and then a certain level of the isolated workforce aren't going to be exposed to this anytime soon. So they figure they can, you know, and they know they'll only lose a percentage of them, so who cares? So if they wipe out a big chunk of their populace, especially in their dense city areas, they just let it happen. They're just going to let it happen. So even if we give it to them, that's why Biden was saying, what do you need to help, you know, in terms of even in Venezuela and Guatemala and in Brazil, when they were talking about immigrants coming up here because they have so many security problems because violence and gangs, they're like, well, we need more street lights on street corners and that'll help us with security. That was true. They asked for this. And Biden went, okay, we'll send people down to build them. And they went, no, we just wanted the money. We'll build them. Like, no, we're not giving you money and trusting you to build, you know, infrastructure and put up streetlights. The American taxpayer is not going to pay for money to go into the hands of death squads via that stuff. We'll build them for you. We'll come down there. We'll do it. But right now, in terms of the military going down there and vaccinating people, the Brazilians are not on board with that. So it's a quagmire. It's you're talking about mixes of cultures and geopolitical stuff that's ongoing and has been going on forever. And that's why we always have commissions, why we have committees, why we sit around. Well, it's why some stuff never gets done, because there is no tenable solution at the time. We got to take a break. Thanks so much for the call. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Parts Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk.